Hi everyone, welcome to this session on mixed age teaching with Power Maths. Thanks for attending. I'm Simon Holden-White. I'm a senior product manager in the primary team here at Pearson and I'm responsible for the Power Maths materials. We've also got Josh Lurie today, who is one of the authors and series editors of Power Maths, and he's based in Cornwall where he supports a lot of schools with mixed age classes. I'll share the agenda then for today. We're going to have a quick introduction. I'm just going to talk about the differences between schools and sometimes the range of approaches that different schools take with mixed age planning for Power Maths. Then I'm going to give a bit of a walkthrough of the new planning that we launched in September 2020, which many of you will be aware of, be using already. And then Josh is going to talk through how you can actually plan your own lesson for mixed age teaching, and then also give some general advice and tips for mixed age teachers, which I think everybody is going to find really useful. And then we'll have some time to answer your questions. So as a bit of background to the new planning that we have launched, teachers had been asking sometimes for aligned lessons between the year groups to make it a bit easier for them, even if that would mean that there was some impact on the Power Maths progression in each of those year groups, if you see what I mean. So that's what we've done. We've aligned lessons between year groups. I think there's clearly a challenge that mixed age teachers always face, and I think the teaching for mastery journey that schools have been on and keeping the whole class together, that then kind of raises some interesting new questions for mixed age teaching. And then I guess there's that extra layer, which is, what about if you're using a mastery textbook program? How does that work with a mixed age class? I know that mixed age teaching, it's never completely straightforward. There are always, lots of things to consider, but I hope that everything that we're going to be talking about today is going to be really useful. Just thinking about those different kind of challenges. Okay, so thinking about the variables, what's different between different schools? Well, one thing will be the availability of TAs, and I guess not just the availability of TAs in a mixed age setting, but also the training that they have, the expertise that they have. Whether the school is part of a trust might be an important or significant difference. It may be, for instance, that the trust is giving a particular steer to schools on how they advise, what they advise for mixed age teaching. Whether the school has got kind of full control over their timetable is a difference that I've met, sort of talking to teachers. The different space in the classroom might make a difference to the approach that you take. And the teachers themselves, of course, the confidence that they have, the experience they have of mixed age teaching, what they're used to, how they want to do things. And of course, the children, there might be a variable there in terms of, for instance, the spread of prior attainment. How big is that spread? In some cases, schools may have mixed age classes because they want to, because they've chosen to group children in that way. But anyway, there's a range of variables here, and I'm not pretending this is exhaustive. This is just an indication of some of the differences. And the reason, I guess, that one size doesn't fit all. So I think that you will, watching this, listen to this, you probably understand that it's not necessarily a case of finding kind of one magic solution which is given to everybody, more a case of thinking about what the options are and what's going to work best for your school. So with that in mind, I wanted to very quickly touch on some of the different approaches that teachers take to Power Maths for mixed age classes. These are just some of the things that we know that some schools are doing. So the first one there, aligning topics and teaching the groups together as much as possible. That's what we are facilitating with our new plans, which I'll be talking about. But you could, and some schools do, timetable separate lessons. That's obviously an option. Another option we've got here of offset lessons. So to explain that, for instance, if you've got a year 3/4 class, the year 3 group might be starting the lesson in the normal way with the teacher, while the year 4 group are doing their independent practice from the day before. Okay, and then once year 3 get to the point of doing their independent practice part of the lesson, year 4 could then be doing sort of starting the new lesson with the teacher. And then obviously that kind of is offset and kind of overlaps into tomorrow. That's an idea, and we know that some schools take that approach. Just a word on that, I would say it doesn't have to, there's flexibility within that idea as there is, within other options. So for example, what I've just said doesn't mean that the year 4 group have to come in completely cold and sit down to their work, to their practice book without any input from the teacher. For instance, it could be that the year 3 group do the power up independently at the very beginning of the lesson, and that allows the teacher to work with the year 4 group, make sure that they're on task, make sure that they understand, remember what they did yesterday, and that kind of thing. So there's always, there's always flexibility with these approaches. The last bullet there, using materials from one year group as the main structure and then tweaking from there. So we know that some schools do that and that works for them. So for instance, if you're a year 5/6 teacher, you could generally base what you're doing on the sort of structure of the learning for the class on the year 6 textbook, and then tweak for the year 5 group as needed. And I guess, I've sort of, I've given the example that way round, but I guess in the following year, to avoid repeating contexts and things, you might choose to work predominantly from the year 5 materials and then tweak for year 6. So, of course, you'd be tweaking for the different groups in the class, but potentially basing it on one year group's materials. And that kind of approach might be easier if you know the curriculum pretty well. Josh is going to be talking about the fact that a key skill for mixed age teachers is knowledge of the flow of the curriculum across the year groups. So as an example of that, that there aren't that many topics where there's a huge jump between the year groups. It's kind of more that flow, but there are some, and that obviously makes a difference to what you do. So for instance, when you are doing 3-digit by 1-digit multiplication and you go to 4-digit by 1-digit multiplication, then there's that feel of kind of a fairly steady flow there between the year groups. Once you go from 3 or 4-digit times 1-digit to 3-4 digits times 2 digits, you're making a bigger jump there. And that's the kind of thing, I guess, that mixed age teachers need to be particularly aware of when they are planning joint lessons. So anyway, I hope that gives you an idea of just some different approaches that schools take. The main purpose today is to support you with the first one, because the aim of the new plans, the new mixed age planning that we've produced, is to help teachers to teach the groups together as often as possible. And we know that sometimes teachers struggle with the logistics in the classroom of managing different groups doing different things. And we'd encourage teachers to adapt the materials so that, if this is the approach that you're taking, so that you can have a whole class teaching input more often than you would otherwise by making tweaks. So, as I say, mostly concentrating on that first bullet. If you want to think more, know more about the other approaches there, you could always be connecting with other schools and finding out what they do to make those other approaches work. So one way that you could do that is on the Power Maths group on Facebook. So by going on there, you could ask teachers whether they take any of these approaches and get in touch with people that way. And do let us know what you're doing and what works for your school. That would be really good, be really interesting, and we might be able to share it with other schools too. So at this point, we're going to move on to part 2, and that's going to be a walkthrough of the new mixed age plans. Okay, so I'm going to run through the mixed age plans that we launched in September. what they are, where to find them, and what they're for, and how they've been designed. So I've logged into Active Learn and into Power Maths, and I'm going to click on the planning tile. Now, hopefully you're all aware of those new resources for September 2020. And underneath that, if you go down, because those resources are the ones kind of aimed at supporting you through the COVID disruption. Also, 20 September were the mixed age plans in this area marked 2020. So that's what I'm going to be talking about now. Overall, what we try to do here is allow teachers teaching across 2 year groups to do the same topics as often as possible. And we've moved blocks around within the planning, within the progression for each of the 2 year groups in order to make that work as well as possible. Useful to know that these are aligned with the White Rose Maths mixed age plans, which are launched a year previous. You may have used those already. You may be familiar with those. That might be useful to you that they are aligned. And also notice that compared to what we had before, we have year 2/3 plan and a year 4/5 plan. So those are a couple of overall things about what we've launched in 2020. And I'm going to walk through some of these materials and show the different documents here. But just quickly to scroll down and see that there is also this mixed age planning 2019. And this might be useful for teachers who are already using these plans, so we didn't want to take them away. And because these plans are slightly different, because they really keep the progression entirely intact for each of the 2 year groups in each plan. So it might be that some schools want to continue to do things that way, although I think that in most cases teachers will find the 2021s more useful if they're not already kind of using them and happy with using them. So hopefully that makes sense. And what I was going to show you while I was down there was there are exemplars in the 2019 plan, which I will talk about briefly today, because they kind of fit in with these 2020 plans. I'll explain that when I get to it. So what is there here? You can see for each of the 5 pairs of year groups, we've got yearly overview, and we've got a plan for each term. And then at the bottom, we've got some lesson exemplars, which are useful across all the different year groups as ways of how you organize a lesson in practice across 2 year groups. So I'm going to open one of the yearly overviews and explain what we've done there and why. Let's have this one, which is year 2/3. So that's the year 2/3 yearly overview. And you can see there's a column for year 2 and a column for year 3. And we've got the units and the objectives within the units for each of those. And before I scroll down, over at the side on the right hand side, you can see the number of lessons that we have allocated to that pair of units and the number of lessons for the whole term. So 56 lessons in the autumn term, quite a lot. If I scroll down, you can see these units are quite well aligned. Addition and subtraction. Sorry if it's making you dizzy watching me just scroll down. Okay, the money units are aligned. Now you can see these money units come in different places in the 2 plans, so you can see the idea. We've aligned those. Multiplication and division aligned, and so on. And then we get down to the spring term. You can see another 56 lessons there, and you can see more multiplication and division. Statistics units have been aligned. It's looking quite easy in this version. Of course, they're all different, but I haven't chosen it as an easy example. Anyway, length and height, length. You can see we've aligned things that you can work on, together across the groups, fractions. Really, I wanted to scroll down as far as the summer term, partly just to show we've only got 35 lessons there. Now that might be useful because you'd be preparing year 2 children for the SAT. So you might find that useful, or you might prefer to have the number of lessons spread across the terms. Really, I just wanted to say that the terms in these documents are quite fluid and not something to get too hung up on. So if there's a lot of work in the autumn term, don't feel like someone's telling you should be able to cover that much in the autumn term. It's really just because we've tried to evenly lay out the units across the terms, and we haven't chopped units between two terms, which inevitably means some of the terms have been a bit bigger than other. But you know, that's okay, and it's fine, of course, to move things between the terms and to start a unit and then finish it in the new term or whatever. Don't see it as being set in stone or anything like that, particularly in these mixed age plans. So anyway, I think that's given you a kind of idea of what the overview does by way of showing the big picture, units that are matched, and the objectives and the number of lessons. So at that point, if we go back to the document that we're opening, we open that one, the yearly overview. So let's open one of the termly documents. Let's do spring for year 2/3. So there's a bit of advice and guidance at the top about what this is and how to use it. You can see here that we've got a year 2 column and a year 3 column. And what this is pairs of lessons. So we've selected lessons from year 2 and year 3 to go together, to be taught together, to give you a chance of teaching the class together as much as possible. You can see some lessons in red. Now, these aren't actually Power Maths lessons. What these are is suggestions for consolidation you could do, or a bit of work that you could kind of keep doing from the day before or from earlier, which helps the progression to kind of stay nicely aligned, if that makes sense. So these red ones, they're not all going to be in year 2. Some of them will be in year 3 further down, allowing year 2 to cover something that they need to do. Year 3 can do a bit of consolidation or revision, and then you can just tally things up nicely again the next day. That's the kind of idea. And of course, they're useful opportunities to do consolidation, as well as just practical ways of aligning the progressions. So that's what the red lessons mean. I want to show you at the top of each unit, there's a red, amber or green bit of text. In this case, it's green, and that is saying that as a whole in this unit, the lessons are strongly aligned, and so it says good overlap possibilities, and it's in green to show you that generally in this unit, the lessons are well aligned. Up at the top, amber one shows that's kind of medium correlation, a few good overlap possibilities. And if I go down, medium again, quite a few useful overlap possibilities. Sometimes, do read the text underneath, which explains a bit more about the links and specific lessons, which it sort of can tell you more about. And then we've got another strong correlation here for fractions. And that's it. Okay, so what we don't have in that spring year 2/3 termly overview was a red one, was a weak correlation, but you'd see it in red saying something like not very many or not very strong opportunities, weak correlation between the lessons from the 2 year groups in the unit. So I hope that is clear about how we've given a guide at the top of the unit, and that's going to be something that is important with the exemplars, because what this document is doing is showing you which lessons are kind of strong, medium, weak correlation, and the exemplars will help you say, okay, if that's the case, how do I organize a lesson, any lesson, with that sort of level degree of correlation? So I think I already mentioned that what we've done in these plans is we've kept whole units intact. And perhaps it's worth saying that hopefully that gives you a really strong kind of base for planning your lessons. But you can go further, in order to get more of your lessons aligned across the 2 year groups. It would, of course, be possible to take some lessons out of a unit and do them somewhere else where they really fit next to the other year group. But of course, if you do that, you need to be mindful of what steps you might be missing leading up to that lesson where it would otherwise have appeared. So I'm just flagging the fact that it's not something we've done in these plans, but obviously, you know, if you're confident and you're really getting into the detail of the progression, it is something that you can do to go further. Okay, so that is the overview for a term, and I should go back and show you an exemplar now. So we've been looking at these. I've showed you a yearly overview and a termly one. So if I scroll down here to the lesson exemplars, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on these, but absolutely it's something to look at your leisure if you haven't already. And I think I said already that these are useful for all the year groups. So if you're a year 5-6 teacher and you want to understand how a kind of medium correlation lesson could be done, certainly you can look at the 4-5 example, look at the 2-3 example to understand what that looks like. So these are useful for all the different year groups. I will start with a strong alignment. So let's look at a strongly aligned lesson from year 3/4. Looking at this then, you can see we've got a year 3 lesson and a year 4 lesson, which the termly overview will have shown go together. And it will also have shown that they're strongly aligned, looking at that unit. And this document then is an example of how you sort of construct a lesson where there is strong alignment, what it looks like. I guess I should say, though, that there's a lot of detail in this document, and I'm not expecting you to read it while I'm flashing through it. It's really just to try and show you the principle behind this document and the structure of it, if you like. So what have we got here? We've got 2 columns, a column for year 3 and a column for year 4. And also in purple here, that shows what the teacher's doing. And so at the moment, the teacher is leading one whole class group, which is why it's not split here into 2 columns. And it starts with the power up. So here, everybody's doing the power up together. And you can see here, the power up is the year 3 power up. In this case, is the one is being suggested. You can decide if you want to do the power up together. You can decide which one you think is more suited to your needs. There's a suggestion here that the year 4 children could do a kind of 4-digit version of what the power up is showing, which is 3-digit palindrome numbers. So you can see, that's a suggestion for how you just tweak the power up so you've got something which is suiting year 4. And then here, everybody's doing the discover together. And in fact, they're, in this case, strong correlation, they're doing the discover and share together. But in this case, the decision is to choose the year 3 discover. Of course, depending on, looking at the materials, you make the decision about which one you were going to go with. And you can see here, there are specific questions for year 3 and questions for year 4, according to what they need. And the information here comes from the teacher guide. So really, when you're constructing your own lesson, you'll see loads of stuff from the teacher guide in this document. And that, of course, is where you can get the information about what you're really trying to get children to understand in each group and what questions you can ask. So that's where that material comes from in this document. And so they do discover and share together. The share section is down here. Okay, so again, they're using the year 3 share page to have a joint discussion. And then in this case, the class are splitting when they get to the think together. So the TA is going to work with the year 3 children on doing their think together questions. At that point, what the teacher is going to do in this example is to do a quick recap of the discover and share content from the year 4 textbook. So the idea here is they've worked together and been discussing the year 3 pages, and actually a quick recap would be fine of the year 4 discover and share, where the teacher is really thinking, you know, what is it that they need to do? What do they need to understand? What do I need to ask that kind of wasn't there in the year 3 pages? So this could be quite a quick run through of the year 4 discover and share, which means that there's also time for the year 4. What are we here? We're year 3 and year 4, yes. The year 4 group to do their think together, and they can do their think together with the teacher a little bit more quickly. The year 3 group will take a bit longer over their think together. So those timings will kind of run together. And then after that, everybody's doing practice from their own year group materials, and everybody's doing the reflect from their own year group materials at the same time. And I think I'll just point out up here where it's split. Of course, that could be the other way around. You know, if you'd started the lesson doing the year 4 discover task, you might at this point have the teacher working with year 3 just to kind of look at their discover and share pages, and the teacher assistant could be working with the year 4 group, moving straight onto the think together. You get the idea, I think. So that is an example of a strong correlation and how that can be done in practice. Again, of course, the message is have a look and think about a pair of lessons that you need to teach and what you would do. So let's go back and think about a case of medium alignment. So we've got 2 of those. We've got a 2-3 and a 4-5. So let's open the year 2-3 medium alignment lesson exemplar. Okay, so this has taken a year 2 time lesson and a year 3 time lesson, but in this case, the termly planning has identified that this is a case of medium correlation between the 2 lessons. So really, this is similar to the strong version, but what happens a bit differently here is that the power up and the discover are done all together as one group. In this case, it's the year 3 power up. You see that there. Then we're using the year 2 discover, again, because that's been chosen to be the best one to use for both groups. Again, special questions to ask year 2 and year 3 from the teacher guide. But this time it just splits that little bit earlier, where the teaching assistant does the share with the year 2 group. And again, the teacher is doing a quick recap of the discover with year 3, and then moving on to their share page and think together, while year 2 group are doing their think together and taking slightly longer over it. Again, at the bottom of this plan, we're going to see that everybody's doing the practice from their own year group and everybody's doing the reflect. So again, very similar to the last one. I want to say, and I think it's obvious, but I mean, firstly, this is just an example of a lesson, and every lesson, of course, is relevantly different. You look at the detail, you look at the 2 lessons, and you think, how can I do something like this? But I would just encourage you all not to feel restricted in what you're doing. So here, if you think you could do the share together, then certainly, that you can make that work if you feel that's the right thing. And even if you're doing a strong lesson correlation, if you feel that you can make the think together work well, because they can look at the same pages, and you can kind of ask the right questions, or it's the right level for the group or whatever, then of course that's fine. So don't be restricted, but hopefully you can see why, as a general example of how to do it, we've chosen to lay it out like this. And I hope it's clear and you can understand the thrust of it anyway. So I think what that leaves is, what do you do about examples of kind of weak correlation between the 2 year groups? So as you can see here, we're in the 2020 section of lesson exemplars, and there isn't one for weak correlation. And that's because we thought really we had done that when we did the Mixed Age Planning 2019. So if I scroll down in the 2019 bit and looking at the lesson exemplars here,
this is what we would advise you look at when you have two lessons which aren't really the same topic or well correlated. So you do have some specific examples of how lessons can be managed where that is the case. But the one I'm going to open is the general mixed age lesson plan exemplar. So really, weak alignment, it's a case of what do you do if you kind of need to run two lessons that are pretty much different. And so this is just a general schema for who could do what within the class with which group, if you like. So you can see that the teacher and the teaching assistant in this example are kind of moving back and forth. The power up has been moved around a bit to help, the teacher to be with each group during the lesson at different points.
I'm going to jump in now. My name's Josh Lurie, and I was one of the main authors on the project and did some work in series editing. And what I'm going to talk about now is to try and build on what Simon said, but look at it from the point of view of a teacher in a lesson. Myself, I have taught mixed age. I'm based down here in Cornwall, so I've taught mixed age for years, and I've worked with teachers in lots of different settings, from teachers that have 2-year groups together, 4-year groups together, and even with classes where we've got, let's say, all of the school in one class. What I'm not going to be able to do is provide any sort of silver bullet or a perfect answer for everybody, but what I am going to do is try and model some of the thinking that I would use in order to be able to make the most out of a lesson. So I'm just checking that one. Great, they can. So I'm going to do some thinking about mixed age. First of all, I'm going to look at a lesson looking at that's earmarked as strong correlation between for year 1 and year 2. I've just picked out this example because I wanted to try and look at one where it seemed like they were so similar, you'd think, well, why don't I just do this as one lesson? And what I'm going to try and pick out of this is actually there are some opportunities for maybe teaching everybody together, but also some important aspects that I need to look at in order to think about how I can best serve both of the year groups. And I'm looking at the year 1 and 2 spring term, and I've found these lessons. So I've picked them more or less at random. They just had the same title, Adding Equal Groups for year 1 and for year 2. So that's my starting point. And we're going to have a look at that. There we go. So I'm there. I picked this because it's spring term, so it's what's coming up after Christmas when we've had a bit of a break. So my first thought, and actually I think this is my first thought, whether I'm teaching a single year group, 2-year groups, 4-year groups, or whatever I'm teaching, is really try and dig into the lesson and think, well, what's the core of the learning here? So I'm just going to take us through in parallel both of the lessons. So I'm looking at them here. So this is the discover task, adding equal groups. I've got year 1 on the left side of the screen as I look at it, and year 2 on the right side of the screen. Just let you scan over those. So both of them are sort of a context that are supposed to enable us to start thinking about equal groups, and hopefully you can see where they're coming from. And then I'm going to look at the share for each of these and just get my head around what's going on here. So I can see that there's some commonality here going on. So they both look at they're doing some sort of skip counting. Year 1 looks at repeat addition. Year 2 looks at repeat addition, but actually it's drawing in the multiplication symbol as well. So perhaps that's something I've got to keep in my mind. So then I'm going to skip through and I'm going to look at the think together. Think together 1. Yeah, that seems to be borne out. So what I'm looking at with the year 1s is that I'm going to use skip counting and I'm going to understand repeat addition. And year 2 is going to be skip counting, but actually what I want to also be able to understand is how that's related to the multiplication sentence, 10 multiplied by 2. As I go through think together and get to the sort of the, particularly towards question 3, I'm thinking, right, okay, what's really getting into this lesson? And for year 1, it seems that I've been doing skip counting, and then when I get to the challenge question, it's maybe I need something else, because skip counting in 4s isn't something that would be covered into in year one. And then on a look at year two, it looks like the journey of that last part of the lesson is, well, think together 2. Looks like I want to count 5 groups of 5, and think together 3 is asking me, well, if I had 5 groups of 5 and then I have one more group of 5, so it's wanting me to get to think, well, if I know 5 groups of 5, I know 6 groups of 5. So I'll just go back and just remind you. So what I was trying to do was get a sense of how do each of the lessons flow, what's the same and what's different. I'm looking at them side by side, and what I've decided is by the time I get to the end of this, for me, for my own clarity and for my teaching point of view, what I want to really clear in my head is, right, well, what exactly is there? If I could carry this away, this nugget of what I'm going to teach today, it is that skip counting is a way of counting equal groups for year one, but it's linked to repeat addition. And for year two, it's that skip counting, but I want the children to be able to understand if they see a multiplication that how that's related to that. So that's me working out. So actually, what I've picked from those 2 lessons is I've decided I like that basket of apples one. That was the one that made sense for me. So at the end of the lesson, ideally, I'd want a year 1 child to be able to look at those apples and be able to count those apples by going 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And ideally, by the end of the lesson, I'd be able to show a year 2 child the calculation 5 times 5 or 5 multiplied by 5, and they would have some way of understanding how to produce an answer. And it might be by using manipulatives to support their understanding. It might be counting in 5s on their fingers, but they'd have some sense that they can use skip counting to get to the end of that lesson. And then they could also, if they start to think about those facts, that they can link together. So I'm going through this process in parallel with both of them. And actually, I found that while I was doing that in parallel, I think I got a clearer sense of sorry, someone's saying they lost sound. I think it's still working. That by working on them in parallel, I think I've got a better sense of how they work. Rather, I'm tempted always to think of how difficult it is to teach at mixed age, and it definitely is, and I don't want to take that away. But I want to think: are there some positives here that I can take from this aspect of the lesson? I've got. The first one is that the flow of the concepts in this case seems to work. I can understand that there's a year 1 to do with repeat addition, and it flows into the year 2 of building on that really quite gradually into understanding multiplication and understanding how that's related to the repeat addition. Actually, I think this is well documented, but comparison does deepen the understanding. So from my point of view as a teacher, by comparing the year 1 and the year 2 lesson, I think I came to a better understanding of what I was trying to get across. Also, there's some sense of, and Tony, who's the series editor of it, all talks about this, if you present one calculation to pupils, and we talk about how to solve it, that's all well and good. If, however, you present 2 calculations in parallel, and then we talk about the ways that we can, what's the same and what's different about solving those calculations, that gives you, it's greater than the sum of its parts, and you can learn more by comparing. So there's something in that that's a positive I can take away. I've got double the resource to draw on. So actually, what I liked was the image of the 5 apples in the 5 baskets, which was from a year 2 lesson. But actually, that helped me think, right, I think that's a really clear image that I want to use with the year 1s. And then when I think about it, because of the flow of the concepts of these 2 lessons, now I've got 2 lessons to be able to draw what I think are the best resources for my class to be able to get this across. I've also got this sense that we can build the concept from the foundations. So because we've got the year 1 flowing into the year 2, and I think actually, as we look at lessons, you see that there are plenty of lessons where you can build this in. There are pupils, and we know this, and particularly in this post-lockdown world, that there are pupils who've missed a lot of stuff, and going back to the real foundations isn't necessarily a bad thing. And so I've got the opportunity to harness some of that foundational learning for those year 2s who might have been on the edge of not being able to grasp the year 2 stuff, just to build them through that. I've also got this, so that sort of the idea of built-in pre-teaching. So I don't think there's necessarily any harm in going right back to those basics and looking at the pre-teaching. So I could draw some of that for the year 2s, or I could use all of it for the year 2s as well as the year 1s. And then finally, maybe there's some time to dig deeper, because then, as Simon was saying, if we look at this, where we were working, so we had the lesson 4 was adding equal groups. Lesson 5 has got this extra lesson, which I've highlighted there, write equal groups as addition sentences for the year 1s. So what I'm thinking is that actually, it's almost bought me some headspace to think, okay, well, I'm going to do that working with adding equal groups with both of them. And then I've got that extra little bit of time when I'm working on the next lesson with the year twos or the content of the next one to really firm that up with the year ones. So my first thinking was, well, if I can have really clear in my head what is it I want to get across and compare the 2 year groups, as a teacher, I'll have greater clarity about what's going ahead. I've talked about some positives. I think there are definitely challenges. One of them is if I'm going to decide to use just one of the Discover tasks with the whole class, shall we say, and I do that the next year, there's a good chance that some of them say, we did this last year. I mean, I'd challenge them to tell me what we did the day before, if I'm being flippant. But actually, again, maybe there's no harm in thinking, well, yeah, we do revisit stuff. And now when you're looking at this, you're coming at it older and you're coming at this from the point of view that, oh, I know more about this now. I'm going to build on this and I'm going to learn on it. The other option is that I could say, yeah, isn't that great? We've also got this other Discover task that we'll look at a bit later. Independent work for younger pupils, and I saw some of this come up in some of the chat. I think that is a challenge, because if I just decided that I wanted to really focus on the year ones and then say to the year twos, go away and do some independent work, that is a challenge. And a lot of the time they're not quite ready to be able to work from a textbook or from the workbook where independently read the questions. That's something I'll come to a little bit later and hopefully talk about in a bit more depth. The next one, I think, for me at the moment, this is the main one. Do they have the number skills to engage with the core of the lesson? So if I remind myself, the core of the lesson was that they use this skip counting to be able to add equal groups rather than counting just in ones. And that's quite a big step for the year ones. It's also quite a big step for the year twos. I want the year twos later on to get to the idea that they can use some times tables to even move a step beyond that. However, the number skills they need is actually to be able to count in twos, fives, and tens for this lesson. If I look at the sequence of the lessons as they are, because the things have been moved around, the way that the year one aspect of this has come into the mixed age planning means that they haven't covered yet counting in twos, fives, and tens. So I need to make sure that there's some way, either I've planned in quite a lot of counting twos, fives, and tens just as a class activity over time. Other bits are that if I look, numbers to 50, which include counting in twos and counting in fives and counting up to 50, is paired with Unit 7 statistics for year two. And so I could drop this in before the actual unit that we were going to be looking at. So I could rearrange some things and take these counting in twos and counting in fives lessons, or in fact take this whole unit and shift it to above. But it's urgent that I notice that, because if I try and launch into this lesson with year ones and year twos, as it is in the plans at the moment, they won't have covered counting in twos and fives and tens to be able to do that. Anyway, my thinking then, as I went back through this, is to go back to the absolute core of this lesson here and think, what I'm going to take from this is that I think I can try and keep them together as much as possible. If I'm in a situation where I want to work with the year ones much more in a focused way, now I know that core of the lesson, I'm going to think of a task that I can use with the year twos that build on them counting in fives, counting in tens, and it might be that it's not working through the workbook. It might be that we played the game fives, or we'll get them to do a building game with cubes where they can make towers of 5 cubes, and they're allowed to do that to make a robot, and then they have to count how many, if they've got them in fives of different colors, can they work out how many cubes they've used for the robot by counting it in fives, or by doing something like that, something practical or something interesting that really comes right back to this core. So hopefully what that gives me is an opportunity, because I'm really clear about how it's going to work, the lesson, I can think, well, okay, these are the activities that I want to focus on each year group. And then while they're doing that, as long as I've got something for the year twos to be working on that is related to that core, then they can be busy, and it doesn't have to be working from the workbook. It could be quite a practical activity or a drawing activity where or rolling dice and seeing how many fives come up when they roll the dice, and collecting all the fives and then counting the results in fives. And I'm trying to, hopefully it frees me up a bit to be a teacher and be quite creative and think, well, this structural thinking has been done by Power Maths. I've compared the two lessons, and now hopefully I can use those positives to build something with those. That was my thinking around planning that lesson, which had a positive correlation, a strong correlation. I'm going to look now at a medium correlation, got a bit of time to look at this. I've picked this up from later on, and I picked it up from a year 4-5 combination, this lesson here. And the reason I've picked it out is because it felt like they look very, very similar. And so where they're paired up, so this is a year 4 lesson alongside a year 5 lesson. So we've got multiplying a 2-digit number by a 1-digit number. And actually the discover task is looking at the calculations done on the board and understanding the methods that the two pupils have done. And then we've got the year 5 lesson. I'm going to have to note this is definitely not one of the lessons I've written. And I think so Tony must have done this. Whenever he wanted a name for someone to get something wrong, I think he chose my name. So the question is, what mistake has Josh made? That's not me putting my own name into it. That's Tony deciding to use me as an example of someone making a mistake. The reason I've picked these out is because they look so similar that I'd be tempted to think, well, surely I'll just teach them together. But actually, if I look at this, multiplying a 2-digit number by a 1-digit number, the jump to multiplying 2-digit by 2-digit is such a different sort of thinking. And it's prone to the misconception of just multiplying the 1s by the 1s and the 10s by the 10s, that actually, even though they look so similar, in this one, it might make much more sense to try and diverge rather than converge, which I've done with the previous lesson. So I'm just going to talk about some of that. They look deceptively similar, and there's a very plausible misconception here, particularly in that jump from the year 4 to the year 5. Again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each lesson and try and be really clear about what the core is. So for the year 4, as I go through, this is from the share. This uses place value counters in, so it makes 5 groups of 23, and then it works. And then we're talking about the exchange across the columns. I have to say, from my personal point of view, I think that I think there are share sections in the textbooks that I think I wouldn't use, and I find that one difficult. So I might be looking for another way to do some of the thinking. I actually think this, which is from one of the Think Together ones, is much cleaner, and I can see how I could work with this with the year 4 pupils. I've made 6 groups of 22. What is it I can do to make this calculation make sense, and how would the picture go alongside the written method? So one thing I'm always doing as I'm going through this is thinking, well, sometimes the share isn't what I think my class needs. Anyway, I'm going to go on to the next one, but just get my way through the lesson. And actually, I think this last bit is... Oh, so I'm getting a comment saying the audio is mixing 2 feeds at once. Is that happening? Okay, I don't know if it is. Right, I'll keep going, sorry. Right, and so getting towards the core of the lesson is that what I want the year 4 to be able to do is to take a 2-digit number and multiply it by a single digit. The next stage of this one, and actually what I'm thinking I'm going to replace, as I get to a later lesson, this is the kind of stage we're going to get to, which is a 3-digit multiplied by a 1-digit. Anyway, so I've got my head around the core of the year 4 one, and I can see the sorts of thinking that I've got the representation alongside the calculation that I want them to be able to do. Now I'm going to look at the year 5 lesson. So the year 5 lesson to me looks specifically different, and different enough that I think I'm not going to teach these two together. And I'm going to look at a way of having the year 4s work on something, probably with those place value counters that I like as a share, and then think about how are the year 5s going to deal with this. So I can see we've got an area model alongside an expanded method here. That's how we present that. And then I've got some of this, and it's building towards this more traditional column method of multiplying. I've got, as we go through, method 1, basically what it boils down to is I want the year 5s to be working on this idea of either they're doing the expanded method, or we're looking at understanding this compressed method here for method 2. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I can see that I need to have some way of introducing the concept of multiplication to both year groups, but actually diverging so that the sorts of thinking the year 5s are doing is clearly different from the sorts of thinking the year 4s are doing when they're using their place value counters. And it comes back again, I think, to this issue. Do they have the number skills to engage with the core of this lesson? And actually, the number skills that they need to engage with the core of the lesson for both year 4 and year 5 here is the same. The number skills that they need to be able to have is if they know some times tables well enough to be able to work on that, then they will be able, it's the times tables. If they don't know the times tables, they're really going to struggle. And if I go back to the year 4 lesson, what it's going to amount to is counting. And actually, that's what I need them to move away from. And if the year 5s don't have the number skills, then these methods here, whether I put them in an area model or whether I put them in a expanded method or a compressed method, they're going to struggle because that's what's going to hold them back. So actually, although there are the challenges about the number skills, that challenge is kind of a positive, and I know that we need to work on make sure the timetables are there for both of the year groups. Having got that clear in my head, I think I'm going to go back to that and decide, well, actually, I probably could keep some of the year 4s with me for that year 5 part, because I know very well that they're going to need the same times tables work and they're going to need to build on that. But also this idea of comparison deepens understanding. So perhaps it affords the opportunity that I can talk about explicitly with the year 4s and the year 5s, that multiplying by 1 digit is very, very different from multiplying by 2 digits. And actually, again, comparing the two things and having it really clear to the class and drawing it out as, look, this is what we're teaching with year 4 and this is what we're working on year 5s all together. Let's look, year 4s and year 5s, how is what you're doing different from what they're doing? They're using place value counters. It'd be silly for us to get the place value counters out with the year 5s. If we look at some of these calculations, I'd have to get 34 lots of 24. How could I possibly make that with the place value counters? And actually moving them on to thinking about, well, what are the methods and working through that way. And it always comes back to this idea of what's the core of the learning. So for me, the core of, no, it says year 1 and year 2, apologies for that. For year 4, really, I want them to be able to say, well, if you give me a 2-digit number, I can multiply it by a single digit. That's what I want to be able to happen at the end of this lesson. I would want them to be able to use their times tables to be able to do that, and that's where I'm trying to move them towards that. And for year 5s, I'd like them to be able to say, if you give me 2 2-digit numbers, I can multiply them together. Once I've got those two cores really clear in my head, I can make the decisions about where do I keep them together. For this one, I'm thinking I might teach the year 4s and the year 5s together to start with, have them both working on 2-digit times a 1-digit. Then I can send the year 4s away with some place value counters and some of the questions in the book, or just some multiplications to do and to practice, calculators to check their answers. It could be some problems or whatever it is. Working on that 2-digit times 1-digit. Actually, I think some of the questions in the workbook work quite nicely for them in that lesson. And then I keep the year 5s and say, look, I know you've done that. We've done that before. It's a really important skill. The reason I wanted to keep you together with that bit and then to move us on is to notice that this next skill is really different. And actually, I think by doing that, I can get to the sense of, well, yeah, they can start to understand why it is that the one method won't transfer into the year 5 method. So we've got those two aspects there that I wanted to look at. Now, I'm just going to go through talking about, so my thought process of designing a lesson for particularly, which I think is even stronger with mixed age, is to go through this process. Step 1, hammer this home, identify the core. Once I've got absolute clarity about what the core is for the year groups that I'm working with, then the other decisions kind of fall away from that. So with this one, my decision is based on keep them all together, because I know the year 2, I want the year 4 or 5 to understand how different what they're learning is from the year 4s. Step 2, identify the number challenges. So if they can't do, and then there's a number skill, very often it'll be if they don't know number bonds or if they can't add across a 10. In this case, it's the times table. If they can't do that, then they can't engage with the core of the lesson. For me, I've decided that in this lesson, it's the same core number skill for year 4 and for year 5. So what I may as well do is try and make sure that I can work on that before the lesson, or have some times table facts that I know I'm going to use and pre-teach some of those, and have that ready. If I haven't identified those number challenges before the lesson, then I can guarantee that's what's going to mean some of the children drop out of the lesson, because they've understood what I'm trying to explain to them, but then the number stuff is what's the block. And then step 3 is to draw on the flow of the concepts. I've got this quote here. I'm going to let you read that and see if you can guess which famous mathematician said that. There's no prizes for it. It's the first sentence of the national curriculum. I'm not sure it always comes across when we interpret what we feel we're being told to teach from on high, but it's certainly the first sentence in the national curriculum, I think, is a really powerful sentence. And the reason I'm going to talk about that is because of this aspect here of it being a highly interconnected discipline developed over centuries. But the highly interconnected discipline means that actually, when I've worked with teachers in many, many different settings on teaching in mixed age, we've never found that there's one right way to teach a lesson, or there's one right way to split up your year groups, or to work if you've got a TA or haven't got a TA, or to build independent. We haven't ever found this perfect silver bullet. But what we have found is that a really important skill set for the teacher to have is to have a sense of the flow of the national curriculum. And that's probably the most useful thing we've found, is that what we've done as groups before, as staff or as teachers from different schools, is to take an aspect of the national curriculum and just track its flow through from year 1 up to year 6, or from reception up to year 6 even. Some of the Ready to Progress materials quite useful for doing that right now. Anyway, in this case, the flow that I'm looking at is I've got 2-digit multiplied by 1-digit, and in one direction, that thinking allows me to go into 3-digit times 1-digit, 4-digit times 1-digit. And in the other direction, there's a different sort of thinking when I have to multiply by 2-digit. As long as I'm very clear on how the concepts flow or don't flow, and where there are barriers, that comes from the knowledge of the curriculum and using the Ready to Progress materials, which can help support that. Power Maths has some links to go with that. So there my thinking. I'm just going to go back through those. So step 1 is identify the core. Step 2, identify the number challenges that are going to prevent the children from being able to access that core. Very often it means pre-teaching or presenting some of the number bonds or times tables. And step 3 is to have clear in my head, well, how do these concepts flow into one another? And so we had that there. So I think that's me modeling the sort of thinking as for those of you that were hoping there was going to be, this is the perfect structure to be able to organize everybody so they're working independently. I don't think there is one way of solving this for different year groups and for different people. However, I do think that if you were to take anything away, having a real sense of the flow, so you can use the national curriculum or Ready to Progress, or just look at the 2 year groups together, and then being absolutely clear about what are the core is of the lesson. And I'll drop that here. So we've got knowledge of the flow of the curriculum, really, really useful. Rationale, if someone asked you, why did you decide to teach both the year and the 4 the same lessons or separate lessons, what would your answer be? If the rationale was, well, it's because I've decided that the concept flows like this, or the concept doesn't flow like that, I think you'd be hard pushed for someone to criticize you for that. You might say, well, I thought that this was going to happen. We tried it and we realized that the year 4s, actually, they needed more time than the year 3s, and that's why it didn't work, and so that's what we're going to do next. However, having the rationale, rather than just saying I ploughed on with whatever because that's what it said for year 3 and that's what it said for year 4, at least I've had a chance. The core of the lesson was this was what I decided about how to get it across and where we can move over into the flow of the concepts. Developing independence, I've put over time. I have worked with teachers who have had a lot of success with using their mixed age setting to develop independence, but it's not happened by just expecting suddenly the year 3s to be really good at working independently. It's happened that they've had to build it in over the whole of the first term, is some routines, some kind of rich activities, some use of manipulatives, training them how to use manipulatives in a way that isn't just making things or throwing things or whatever, but how to get something out of it. But that's taken time, and I think that's something that you'd need to build into a term, or even over the course of after Christmas. You might think, right, we're going to build this in, so gradually we're going to teach them up to be able to get, by the time we get to Christmas, they're set up to be able to work independently. I think there are real challenges for working in a mixed age setting, but also there are potentially some positives, which I've touched on there. So I absolutely don't want to take away from that. Having taught in mixed age, I can definitely agree there are many challenges in it, and it's sometimes very awkward to think, well, am I doing the right thing for both year groups? There's one year group missing out, but actually maybe I can focus in on, well, what are the positives? And one of the positives to maths is that interconnection and that flow. I've put there multiple year groups per class. So some classes we've got year 3 and year 4. I think what I've been trying to lean us towards is there are opportunities to teach 2 year groups together, where you've got year 3, 4, 5, 6 in a class, I think that becomes, if you were to try and teach them all together, that becomes a much more sort of difficult thing. And I think that actually, I know that where teachers have tried to do that, it hasn't worked out. And so they've had to look at really building that independence over time. And then if they're going to teach, usually it's 2 year groups maximum together. Being able to teach 4 year groups together requires an awful lot of structural thinking. Challenge for all, I'm just going to mention. So I get asked this a lot. What do I do for those pupils, not the ones who need to go slower or need that foundational work, but for the ones that need to go a bit more challenge? I will suggest, so I've picked this out from the year 5 lesson. So this was a question in the, I think it was in Think Together, in the challenge question, Think Together. And actually, rather than just liking the question, I kind of realized, well, actually, there's a lot of challenge going on there. And so if I wanted to set up a challenge and have some questions which would keep some children challenged, all I would have to do as a teacher would be to, even using a calculator or whatever, do a 2-digit times a 2-digit, work out the answer, and then make my own one of these splattered out ones for the pupils to be able to work with. I think one of the positives about Power Maths is that it's got some opportunities to do that. So there are some questions in there, but also some ones that I can look at and think, oh, I can make a few versions of this one myself to push for that challenge for all. Where there's no correlation, I know that Simon touched on this. I think I've seen schools doing different things, and if you've got a TA, it's very different. I think that's a separate thing where where you're teaching them completely 2 different things. I think that's about classroom management, and that's about deciding beforehand, well, what if I've got one group working independently, if I know there are number blocks, that are number challenges that the skills they're not going to be able to have to access that, then I might need to find an activity that doesn't have those number challenges, but instead has something rich. So like I was talking about, building a robot out of bunches of 5 cubes fit together. Final thoughts. Is Power Maths mixed stage planning perfect for my class? No, nothing that's designed essentially can be perfect for any class. However, and so do I need to make decisions and tweaks? Yes. However, what Power Maths does give you is, a team of people have done some structural thinking around organizing the concepts over time, how the concepts flow, how I can build the representations. They've got a good range of questions to deepen understanding. What hopefully it does is, as a teacher of a mixed age year group, you've got 2 year groups or 3 year groups to think about. What Power Maths has done is some of that structural, organizational, mathematical thinking, got some examples of some different sorts of questions to deepen understanding, examples of how they flow together. So hopefully what that would do is free up some of our time as teachers to think, well, that's great, Power Maths has done this work, how can I really bring this to life for my class? So for the year 1s and 2s, it might be something about playing a game called Fives, where you show 5 or 0 and you count up the 5s and something like that. So what I would say is that Power Maths doesn't have perfect answers, but it does have some of that structural pedagogical thinking that I can then build on, and it frees me up to think, well, great, that's fine. Thank you, Power Maths, for doing that. Now I'm going to be a teacher and bring that to life. I think it was a question about what do you do if you're teaching the year groups separately and you've realized that one year group needs more work, more focus on something and needs to slow down a little, and you've got the other year group alongside and they're fine or something like that. So what do you do when you need to slow it down? I think is, and I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing to think. The first thing I'd come back to is to just think to myself, perhaps, what is it that means I've got to slow down with this other year group? I would off the top of my head guess it's either the number work, so they don't know the number bonds, or they don't know the times tables that they need. Secondly, is it might be that the representations I'm using would be perhaps, so some of those shares, I think when I look at the share, perhaps it's the share that is muddied the matters by using too many things or doing that. So that one I showed with the exchange, I think didn't work very well for me. The other one is perhaps I've done too big a jump with them. So whereas with the other group that's flying, I think what I would do is, like I just showed with some of those challenge questions, there's some really nice, that splattered out question, for example. Well, I think what I try and do is harness some of those, adapt some of those, try and generate some ones that they can think more deeply about, some more like that. Often the Discover task could be adapted like that. I go back to the Discover and think, well, what can I do? How can I tweak that? How can I do some missing number stuff? Give that to the other year group, because often then I can then go back to working with the other year group. If the other year group needs me to go on for a long, long time, then that means that really there's something going on there that I might need to go back to. Chances are the other year group or some of it will need some of that too. There's my thoughts on that. I think there were two questions. One is, if you don't have a TA, how can you manage the year groups? And then the second is, if you've got children who are struggling with the reading, and so if the independent work, if they can't access the reading required to do the independent work, I think they were the two. So they're the two things I'll try and talk about. I think I'll come back to that idea of, so what Power Maths has given us is this kind of overall structure. So I'll imagine a situation where I'm working with the year ones and year twos on that lesson to do with skip counting, and then what I might have wanted is the year twos to be able to go away and do some of the questions to do with counting in fives, counting in tens, counting in twos, and being able to access the questions in that way. But actually, while I work with the year ones, because some of them haven't quite got their skip counting, but actually the year twos working independently is a really tricky skill for some pupils, if not many pupils of that age. And actually, the questions in the workbook are often, we design them to be kind of have a variety of questions so that there'd be access to lots of different thinking. I think what I would do is say, thanks, Power Maths, you've done some really good structural thinking, you've written some really good questions. I'm going to look at which questions I think, how do they dig into the core of this lesson? And I think I would take them out of that and adapt them and give 4 or 5 different versions of that question, but having explicitly done it without the reading, and think, these are the ones I like how these work. Or it might be that I say, I can see how to turn this into a much more practical thing that I can do with a class. So for example, that building a robot out of chunks of 5 cubes. They're still doing the skip counting, and I can go over and they can work with a partner on count how many cubes are in your robot, count them in 5s or count them in 2s or whatever it is. What I think in that situation I would do is say, thanks very much, Power Maths, for doing these textbooks and this work. I'm now going to be a teacher outside and take that idea and turn that into a practical or a vivid kind of two-person game to be able to play and build on it in that way. If it's rather than getting them to sit down and work through the textbook or the workbook on their own in that situation, that's what I would do.
Thanks, Josh. That's really good. We had a question about reception year 1 classes. I tried to answer this one by kind of saying that there's a lot of variety about what schools do in reception in terms of how formal the learning is, and maybe, how it kind of transitions into year 1 over time. I did say that what we've got with our reception materials is flexible teacher-led activities, which are, fairly short amount of time, and then also ideas for continuous provision that you can put in. And so, using those, hopefully teachers can build those in the way that they find best alongside year 1. But I wondered whether you had any particular ideas about those year groups.
Yeah, I think what we'd look at is that I don't know the reception materials particularly well because I didn't write those, but the year 1 materials, the Discover task, I tried to write it as much as possible so that it was a picture of a version of something practical you might be able to think about or reenact with toys or continuous provision, or a game you might be able to play, or something out in the playground. And so again, I think what I'd do would be to say, actually, I can see how I can take this concept or this game or this idea, and I can make it really practical, and we can do this with the year 1s. And the reception can, often the game will be a game that we could do. So, for example, it could be hopscotch or something like that they could do outside. Or there's one with a game where the counter's in the hands and how many's in the other hand, and you can do that with hidden in the cup, how many bears in the tin. I think what I'd do is take I could see how your Discover task, thanks Power Maths, your Discover task is a picture of something that I can be a teacher and make that real and bring that to life, which is what I would do. I've just thought of something that goes with the previous questions about the children who are struggling to read. I don't know if you've got the textbooks. One thing I might suggest doing would be say to a group of children, look, even if I've got just two, I haven't got textbooks for every child, to say, can you take this, open the page and say, can you take this textbook? Look, there are loads of pictures here. There are loads of words. Can you go away? Can you go away with Jimmy over there? And can you work out what on earth's going on here? Is there anything you recognize? Is there anything? Can you see the number 5 on that page anywhere? Can you see? And what do you think the counters are for? And send them away with a bit of a mystery task. Not that they have to read it all, but can they dig into the visual? They're really quite engaging materials, whether or not they can read every word, but just set it as a bit of a mystery. Sometimes that might work. Take that away. See what meaning you can make out of it. Bring it back to me and we'll talk about that later.
Well, thank you. This might be the last one. Somebody asked, what do I do? I've got 3-year groups and I don't have an extra adult TA. And I mean, you did talk about this, so, you don't have, there may not be much to add to what you said before, but is it, once you get beyond 2-year groups, is it then becoming more about kind of mining the materials to make your own lesson rather than kind of, running the two things that are there? Is it more a case of taking the ideas and constructing a lesson, or I don't know, have you got any further thoughts about multiple year groups?
I mean, all of this is just my thoughts, having taught mixed age and having done teaching, but also having been involved with the writing of Paramaths. I would say, again, it comes back down to, if I'm really, really clear about what the core of the learning is that I want each year group to get out of the lesson, or if I'm really clear about that, and then I can look at the Paramaths materials and mine them, as you said, there's a good question, there's some interesting thing, that representation doesn't work, I'm going to do this, that discover task I can turn into this. And I would say, thanks very much, Paramaths, you've done some of the structural, the mathematical thinking, and I will take what I can from that and make that into a lesson. My personal thought is, if I've got 3 year groups, teaching that all 3 together would not be the norm. There might be the occasional time when I think, you know what, this discover task is perfect for all 3 year groups. But I'd say it becomes much less likely that's going to happen on a regular basis. Whereas with 2 year groups, particularly if they're not cross phase, often I could see how I could take the materials and say, I'm going to use this. I can teach you most of this all together and then move 1 year group over here or support 1 year group here. Yeah.
Thanks, that's good. So so it might be more a case of finding ways to it separately. I think that could be, I don't think we've got any extra ones I haven't spotted. We can do more thinking and kind of add to responses to the questions. I think rather than give you a poll to answer, what we can do, I expect, is when we send anything after the session in terms of answers to questions or whatever, we could give you a poll to do then, just to check what you think about the options and the approach that you're taking in your school. So I think we could finish, and maybe we can finish with a bit of a positive around flexibility and tweaking not being a bad thing, because I think that mixed age teaching, sometimes it's going to mean that you've got extra thinking and planning that you've got to do. I have to admit that. But I guess it requires teachers to look at, if you've got 2 year groups in your class, it requires teachers to look at 2 lessons and think, what's the key learning for each group here? And how can I bring that to life as a really great lesson for both groups, one way or the other? And the thing is, actually, in terms of that thought process, it's the sort of thing we would encourage single year group Power Maths teachers to think about as well, using the materials. So I like to think that thinking hard about the materials and how to use them to teach a great lesson is something that you're automatically being kind of prompted to do as a mixed age teacher, which is just a really good thing that we'd encourage anyway. So I hope that's a positive to finish with.
Simon, just one thing that I thought also, that we did create quite a lot of videos for the BBC bite-sized content that do so. There is possibility of having a year group watching one of those videos. So the video was designed to be used as home learning, but that could also be an option where a year group watches the video, which is part of the asynchronous content that we've built, and which would allow you to then work with the other year group. So that's a possibility as well.
Thank you. Good point. So you, as Power Maths users, you may have noticed, you probably will have noticed that there are some videos for each year group, a few videos for each year group in Active Learn that do that. But we're also adding, we're going to add some more of those, which are the ones Josh is mentioning that we developed working with the BBC to help during lockdown, school closures. So we've got some more videos that do that for spring and summer term topics, which hopefully we will have launched early in the spring term, so you can use those for that purpose. So hopefully that'll be useful. And really, so I think we've come to the end, and I hope that the plans that we've added will be useful in one way or another for most schools with mixed age classes. But it will be great to hear what you think of them and get your feedback once you've had a chance to try them out. So don't be afraid to send in your thoughts about, how things could be improved, but also to connect with each other, whether it's in the Facebook group or whether actually from today, what you really want is to be able to talk to other teachers who are having to do the same thinking and make similar decisions and so on. So great. Thanks very much to Josh. But for all of the thoughts there, and I probably should say before we finish, I'm really sorry about the audio, and I don't know what it's been like, but having to listen to me and getting really bad sound, I guess I'd just say we're not in the office, as you could understand, so home Wi-Fi. Anyway, I'm really sorry about that. Thanks very much to everybody for attending, and do keep in touch. Thank you.